There's a video going around right now, and if you're a BTS fan, there's a good chance it already found its way into your feed. A clip and a photo, shared from what looks like a Korean Chinese restaurant somewhere in Toronto, show Jimin sitting at a table with a group of people fans are identifying as dancers from the ARIRANG World Tour. No stage lights, no fan chants, just Jimin, laughing mid-conversation, completely off duty. And within hours, it was everywhere, retweeted, stitched, reacted to, and dissected frame by an army of people who somehow always seem to know exactly where this man is eating dinner. Now, before we get into it, let's be upfront about something, because accuracy actually matters here. This is not an official post from BTS, from Jimin, or from HYB. It's a fan-shared clip, the kind that circulates constantly during a world tour, and like every one of these moments, it comes with the same disclaimer every single time. We can't independently verify every detail, who exactly is at that table, what was said, or the full context of the night. What we can say is that the location, the timing, and the people in frame line up perfectly with something that's been happening in Toronto all week. And that's really where the story gets interesting, because this isn't just a random restaurant photo. This is a moment that sits right in the middle of one of the biggest weeks of BTS's entire ARIRANG World Tour. Here's the timeline. BTS's Toronto stop on the ARIRANG World Tour is set for back-to-back sold-out shows at Rogers Stadium, part of the North American leg of the tour that's been rolling through stadiums all summer. If you've been following along with everything happening on this run, Brussels, London, Munich, Paris, then across the Atlantic to MetLife, Gillette, Baltimore, and Arlington, you already know this tour has been less of a concert series and more of a rolling world event. Every single stop has produced its own viral moment. Every single city has turned into a stage for something bigger than the set list. Think about everything that's happened just on the North American leg alone. MetLife Stadium, where BTS closed out the FIFA World Cup final halftime show in front of a global audience most artists will never come close to touching. Gillette Stadium, Baltimore's M&T Bank Stadium, Foxborough, Arlington, where Jimin had that emotional Make-A-Wish moment on night one that had fans in tears within minutes of the clip going up. Every single one of those stops has generated its own headline, its own viral clip, its own wave of reactions. And now Toronto joins that list, except this time the headline isn't from the stage, it's from a dinner table. So when a clip surfaces showing Jimin sitting down for a quiet dinner in the same city where thousands of fans just watched him perform, of course it's going to catch fire. It's the contrast that makes it irresistible. The same man who was pouring everything into a stadium full of 60,000 screaming people just hours earlier is now sitting at a table, joking around with the people who share his stage every single night. And that's actually the detail that matters most here, more than the restaurant, more than the food, more than any of it. The people reportedly at that table with him are tour dancers, not random guests, not industry acquaintances. The people who are on stage with Jimin every single night of this tour, matching his choreography beat for beat, being right there next to him during some of the most demanding performances of his career. If you've watched even one clip from this tour, you already know how physically intense these shows are. Full-scale choreography, multiple costume changes, a set list that doesn't let up. The dancers aren't background noise in that equation. They're the reason those performances land the way they do. And apparently, according to what's circulating, after all of that, Jimin's idea of a night off wasn't some exclusive, closed-door VIP scene. It was grabbing a meal with the people who just spent the night on stage with him. If that sounds like exactly the kind of thing Jimin would do, that's because it lines up with basically everything that's ever been said about how he treats the people around him. This isn't the first time a story like this has surfaced. Go back to Jimin's Face era during the Like Crazy promotions, and you'll find one of his dancers, Kim Jin-sol, who performed alongside him as what fans nicknamed his reflection for that entire era. She's danced with plenty of major names in the industry, but the way fans talk about her chemistry with Jimin on that stage has always stood out, not just as choreography, but as something that looked like genuine trust between two performers who clearly worked incredibly closely together. Then there's the story from Jimin's Smeraldo Garden Marching Band video shoot, when one of the dancers who worked with him, known online as OK Sun, went live and talked about the experience. He described Jimin as kind and said the atmosphere on set was fun despite how much work was involved. It's a small detail, But it's the kind of small detail that adds up when you hear the same thing over and over from different people who've actually worked with him. And it goes back even further than that. Back in 2021, at the UN General Assembly, one of the backup dancers for the Permission to Dance performance, an American dancer named Brendan Morris, talked about the moment Jimin noticed him in the crowd and waved, and how much that small gesture meant to him. It's easy to forget, when you're watching a global superstar perform on one of the biggest stages in the world, that the people standing behind him are also just people doing an incredibly difficult job, usually without a fraction of the recognition the person in front gets. So when a story surfaces about that same superstar going out of his way to sit down and share a meal with them after a show, it doesn't feel random. It feels like a pattern, a consistent, years-long pattern of Jimin treating the people who work alongside him like they matter, on camera or off. There's also a piece of this that hits different if you know BTS's own origin story, because before any of them were BTS, several of them were exactly that, backup dancers. Jimin, Jungkook, Suga, and J-Hope all performed as backup dancers for the girl group Glam back in 2012, a full year before BTS even debuted. Before the World Stadium tours, before the record-breaking Billboard runs, before any of it, they were the ones standing in formation behind someone else's spotlight, doing the unglamorous, physically demanding work that never gets a single headline. If the man at that Toronto table really did spend his night off with his tour's dancers instead of retreating somewhere private, it's not hard to connect the dots. He knows exactly what that job is like because he used to have it. Now let's talk about the restaurant itself for a second, because there's something almost poetic about the location if the details being shared are accurate. A Korean Chinese restaurant in Toronto. Not a 5-star tasting menu. Not some ultra-exclusive members-only spot with a 2-year waiting list. A Korean Chinese restaurant, the kind of comfort food spot you'd expect a group of tired performers to actually want to eat at after a brutal night of shows. And this actually isn't even the first time BTS has been connected to a Korean restaurant in that exact city. Back in 2019, during an earlier world tour, all 7 members were spotted at a Korean restaurant called Sankai Braised Chicken House in Toronto, a visit that made local headlines after the owner said he had no idea one of the biggest groups in the world was about to walk through his door until they showed up. That was years ago, a completely different tour, a completely different era of the group. But here they are again, in the same city, with what sounds like the exact same instinct. After the lights go down, find good Korean food and share it with the people you trust. And if you want an even more recent example, you don't even have to go back that far. Just last month, after wrapping their London shows, all 7 members were seen together at a Korean restaurant, sharing a full spread of grilled pork belly and traditional stews, clearly unwinding as a team after another emotionally and physically massive night on stage. Fans went wild trying to figure out exactly where that restaurant was. It's basically become a signature move at this point. The show ends, the adrenaline starts to fade, and instead of scattering off separately, BTS gravitates toward the same thing, sitting down together over Korean food. Toronto, if this story holds up, is just the latest chapter of that same tradition, except this time it's not just the 7 members. It's Jimin extending that same instinct to the dancers who've been right there with him on stage every single night of this tour. And Toronto itself has basically been running on BTS energy this entire week, which only adds to why this dinner story feels so in character for the moment. Local restaurants across the city rolled out BTS-themed menus timed to coincide with the sold-out Rogers Stadium shows, Korean chef-led spots putting together limited-run dishes and cocktails named after BTS songs, playlists built around the discography, the whole city leaning into ARMY energy for one weekend. So the idea that Jimin himself would end up at a Korean Chinese spot somewhere in that same city, blending in with exactly the kind of atmosphere Toronto was already serving up for fans all week, doesn't feel like a stretch at all. It feels like the natural conclusion of a city that spent days preparing for BTS to show up, only for one of them to show up somewhere nobody expected. A quiet table, off the official schedule, with the people who make the show happen every night. Let's slow down on that for a second, because it's worth sitting with. Think about what a stadium tour actually demands from a performer like Jimin. He's not just singing, he's dancing full out, night after night, city after city, time zone after time zone, in front of tens of thousands of people who are watching his every move, waiting for every note to be perfect. That kind of schedule is physically brutal. The recovery time between shows is minimal. The pressure to deliver a flawless performance every single night, on a stage broadcast to millions online within minutes, never really lets up. After a night like that, most people would understand if he wanted total isolation, room service, silence, recovery. Instead, if this video is accurate, what he chose was a table full of people, laughter, and a shared meal with the dancers who'd just been through the exact same grueling night as him. That's not a small thing. That's a choice. And it's the kind of choice that tells you something real about a person, especially someone operating at this level of fame, where isolation would honestly be the easier option. It's also worth pointing out just how quickly this kind of moment spreads and why. In the age of instant uploads, a single unposed photo from a random fan can end up circulating faster than an official announcement. That's the reality of touring at the scale in 2026. There is functionally no such thing as a truly private moment for someone like Jimin, not when there's a phone in almost every hand, in almost every city, at almost every hour. Some fans see that as invasive, and honestly, there's a real conversation to be had about where the line should sit when it comes to a person's basic right to eat a meal without being filmed. But there's also no denying what these moments do for how fans understand who these artists actually are outside the performance. A 5-minute grainy video of a dinner table tells you something a polished interview never could, because nobody's performing for the camera in that moment. Nobody's picking their words for a press release. It's just a group of tired, hungry people sharing food after a long night at work. And that's really the story underneath the story here. This isn't actually about the restaurant, or the exact dish on the table, or even confirming every single detail of who was there and what time they walked in. It's about what this moment represents in the bigger picture of who Jimin is as an artist and as a person. 7+ years into global superstardom, still choosing to sit down with the people behind the curtain instead of above them. In an industry that constantly draws hard lines between the star and the staff, between the name on the poster and the names nobody bothers to learn, a moment like this, even an unofficial, fan-caught, impossible to fully verify moment like this, cuts right through that. It suggests that behind the choreography and the pyrotechnics and the sold-out stadiums, there's still a guy who remembers what it felt like to be the one standing in the background, and who never stopped treating the people doing that job now like they belong at his table. And it's not like this is happening in a quiet week for BTS news either. This dinner story is landing in the middle of one of the busiest stretches the group has had all summer. Just days ago, fans were still processing the news that Swim picked up a nomination for this year's MTV VMAs, adding to a run of award recognition that's followed the group through this entire era. On top of that, J-Hope has his own nomination this year through his feature on a LE Seraphim track, which means there are now 2 separate BTS-connected nominations circulating at the same time, on top of an ongoing world tour, on top of viral moment after viral moment from every single stop. It's genuinely hard to keep up with everything happening around this group right now, and that's exactly why a moment like this dinner in Toronto doesn't just exist in isolation. It lands inside a wall of non-stop BTS news, and somehow still manages to cut through and become its own story. That's also part of why the reaction online has been so immediate. Scroll through the replies under any post about this, and you'll see the same handful of reactions repeating over and over. Fans pointing out how normal and unbothered Jimin looks in the footage. Fans zooming and trying to identify which dancers are at the table. Fans comparing this to the London dinner from just weeks earlier, and a whole separate thread of people just saying, in some version or another, that this is exactly why they've stayed invested in this fandom for years. It's not really about the food, and it was never really about the restaurant. It's about the fact that 7+ years into a career, most people can barely comprehend the scale of this is still the instinct. After the show ends, find the people who were just up there with you and share a meal like it's the most normal thing in the world. Because to him, it probably is. Whether every single detail from this clip turns out to be exactly as fans are interpreting it, we honestly can't say with total certainty, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. What we can say is that it fits. It fits the timeline of the tour. It fits the city. It fits the pattern of behavior that's been documented from Jimin for years, from dancers, from crew members, from people who've actually worked alongside him and had nothing to gain by saying kind things about him. And it fits into a larger BTS tradition of ending a brutal night on stage the exact same way, gathered around a table, sharing a meal together. If you're new here and you're only now getting into who Jimin is and what makes this kind of story resonate so hard with people who've followed him for years, welcome. You picked a good moment to start paying attention. This tour has been an absolute masterclass in what it looks like when an artist doesn't just perform for an audience, but actually shows up for the people working alongside him, night after night, city after city. And if you've been here for years already, and none of this surprises you even a little bit, let us know in the comments what your favorite Jimin and the team moment has been from this entire tour so far, because honestly, there have been a lot of them, and this Toronto dinner might just be the latest, but it almost certainly won't be the last. Before you go, if you want to stay caught up on everything happening with BTS and Jimin as this tour keeps rolling through North America, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because between tour stops, viral moments, and everything still ahead on this leg of ARIRANG, there is a lot more coming, and you do not want to miss it. Drop a comment telling us what you think really happened at that table in Toronto, and while you're at it, tell us which tour stop has given you the best Jimin moment so far. Was it Arlington? Was it Paris? Was it this one? We read every single comment, and honestly, some of the best context on stories like this comes straight from you. One more thing before we wrap up. Stories like this one are a good reminder of just how much scrutiny these artists live under every single day, in every single city, whether they're on a stage in front of 60,000 people or sitting at a dinner table trying to unwind after one of the hardest nights of physical performance. Most of us will never fully understand. It's easy to forget, when you're scrolling past clip after clip, that there's a real person on the other side of that table, someone who just spent hours giving everything he has to a stadium full of strangers, and then chose, when the cameras were supposedly off, to spend his night with the people who'd been right there with him the whole time. That's the part of the story that's actually worth remembering, long after this particular video stops trending. So that's where things stand right now. A video, a location, a group of dancers, and a moment that, verified in every last detail or not, lines up with everything fans have come to expect from Jimin after 7+ years of watching how he treats the people around him. As this tour keeps moving through North America, you can bet there are going to be more moments just like this one, caught on someone's phone in some random city, spreading before anyone official even has a chance to comment. And every single time, the reaction is going to be the same, because at this point, it's not really a surprise anymore. It's just who he's always been. If this kind of deep dive into what's actually happening behind the scenes of the ARIRANG World Tour is the kind of content you're here for, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more of this tour still to go, and we're going to be right here covering every single stop, every single moment, and every single story worth telling, whether it's confirmed on the record, or just something a fan happened to catch on their way out of dinner in Toronto. And if you're trying to keep up with everything else happening around BTS and Jimin right now, the VMA nominations, the rest of the North American tour dates, whatever comes out of this Toronto stop next, that's genuinely the best reason to stick around this channel long term instead of relying on whatever random clip happens to cross your feed that day. We're tracking every stop of this tour as it happens, breaking down the moments that matter and separating what's actually confirmed from what's just speculation, so you're not left trying to piece together the full story from 20 different fan accounts all posting slightly different versions of the same clip. Like this video if you want to see more coverage like this, and let us know down in the comments which stop on this tour you think is going to top Toronto before ARIRANG wraps up. Because if this tour has taught us anything so far, it's that just when you think you've seen the biggest moment of the run, BTS, and Jimin especially, find a way to give you another one. We'll see you in the next video.